I'm very happy that Nadine chose this one for me too. This is Ilya Kabakov, The Man Who Flew into Space from His Apartment, which I know is the title of one of the most amazing installations. And then this is written by Boris Groys. And so the section that you've earmarked for me here, but the cosmic energies that the hero of the installation wanted to turn to his advantage are the same energies that the Soviet space program had benefited from earlier. For these were the utopian energies that gripped a technically backward nation and took it into space. For a time, the Soviet Union's space exploration was the mainstay of official propaganda. Cosmonauts were glorified and celebrated like few others in the land. After Yuri Gagarin became the first man in space in 1961, the country looked up into the sky with a different sense of pride. And maybe it was this very enthusiasm for space exploration that led to something like complicity between the Soviet state and its people. Space travel reactivated the utopia that once gave birth to Soviet power. Suddenly, people felt a new innate kinship between their own dreams and longings and the giant utopia of a global cosmic communist society, a kinship that had long seemed to be a thing of the past. It was precisely this kinship that is first and foremost the focus of Kabakov's installation. The man's room is filled with Soviet posters, designed and executed according to the conventional official aesthetic of that time. Even the picture painted by one of the man's friends that also has a place in the room obeys the same aesthetic. It portrays a moment of collective ecstasy, of jubilation and triumph, the sort of thing we assume that every artist secretly dreams of, for every artist wants to be feted. But these images of ecstasy are not enough. Each person wants to experience that ecstasy for himself or herself, even if alone. And that's when it seems that to the artist, for we are dealing here with an artist, as in the case of all of Kabakov's other installations, that this flight into the cosmos could be a last chance to reconcile individual and collective ecstasies, to realize a collective dream alone and in private. After all, although the cosmonaut is alone as he orbits the Earth, he knows that he embodies the collective dream. And above all, he knows that he didn't get there through his own strength alone, but by virtue of the energy of these collective dreams, aptly symbolized by the rocket that delivered him to that place where he is now solitary in orbit. It is no different for the artist. He will never manage to launch himself into the art world entirely under his own steam. And just when the artist finds himself completely on his own, he is most staringly impelled forward by nameless collective energies. So you could say that the hero of Kabakov's installation was able to fly out of his room because he had accumulated the energy inherent in the posters, which in turn tap into the collective energy of the Soviet people. Those same posters in the empty room that looks similarly empty and abandoned now that he is gone. Without having been inspired and buoyed as he was by the collective communist ecstasy, he would still be lying there in bed. His own nighttime dreams would never have been able to catapult him out into the cosmos. Is that the section?
Yes.
So this is interesting. I mean, there's a whole kind of aspect to this that connects with, the importance of recognizing any kind of visibility as the product of a lot of different people, a lot of different energies, and so it's interesting to think about the final paragraph and about the stratospheric rise of an artist being something that's propelled by forces other than their own making, and the necessity of that and the tragedy of that. I also think about looking up and what the sky means as a visionary space for the entire planet. And there's an artist at CalArts that I met last year named Alia Ali. She's from, or her mother and her father, one is from the former Yugoslavia, the other is from the former South Yemen, so she's from two countries that no longer exist. And she's doing this project, this really beautiful project that's like a series of different pieces that fall under this rubric that's looking at this moment in 1997 when the Mars Pathfinder landed on Mars, and there were three Yemeni men who looked to sue NASA because the red star, Mars, was given by King Solomon to the Queen of Sheba, Belkis, whose throne was in Yemen, and they saw it as an invasion of their inherited territory. It was absolutely beautiful, flipping the script, So all of a sudden, like, the extractive methods of the West are then reversed, and then these three Yemeni men do something that's impossible, which is, instead of seeing their artifacts in vitrines, they build a vitrine around an entire planet. But it also makes me think of the Persian Storytellers Guild, or the Society of Persian Storytellers, who in 1969, when one of the Apollo missions going to the moon was announced, they wrote to NASA to ask them to not go through with it because it would rob the world of its illusions and would put them out of work. I thought that was really beautiful. Like, what does it mean when something's consummated and the visionary architectural drawing suddenly becomes real and it's never quite what it could have been? So this makes me think about all the things that we dream of doing that maybe we shouldn't do. So the next section in this book, Groys continues, Kabakov's installation breathes new life into the utopian potential not only of communist ideology, but also, and most importantly, of the Russian avant-garde with its own close links to communism. In the early years of the 20th century, the figure of the aviator had the same fascination for the international avant-garde, particularly for the Russian and Italian futurists, as the figure of the cosmonaut was to have for Kabakov's generation. An important aspect of the aviator's appeal was his isolation high up in the sky, with the result that the fascination of air travel waned as soon as it became accessible to the masses. True to type, Tatlin expresses this widespread fascination when he created his Litatlin, an extremely archaic-looking contraption which was meant to fly, powered solely by the pilot's own muscle strength, with no additional motors of any kind. At first sight, it looked like an aberration of sorts, because de facto the Litatlin could not fly. But on closer examination, it demonstrates the extent to which the aeronautics industry had misused and betrayed the dream of flying. It was not the human being, but the machine that had been given wings. Specifically, because of its archaic form, the Litatlin evoked that ancient primal human desire to be able to fly, which has nothing to do with technological feasibility, and which makes even the most modern aircrafts look like empty shells. Kabakov's hero is a new Tatlin, an avant-gardist long after the days of the avant-garde, who dreams the dream of the avant-garde one last time in the seclusion of his own room. But he doesn't just dream, passively registering it as something impossible, and his work is in no sense nostalgic. On the contrary, he realizes the dream of the avant-garde, for he successfully flies up into the cosmos, and, as we have said, not just in his dreams or in his imagination, but bodily, immaterial, physical terms. Beautiful. Very beautiful. I mean, this for me is a continuation of that thought about the visionary and about whether or not it should be realized. But what it actually makes me think of is, what it's making me think of right now is a book that I found a couple of years ago that served as the basis for a class that I did that was about public art and agitation and activism. And this book is called Strike Art, written by Yates McKee, and it really looks at the experience of Occupy Wall Street in 2011 and Zuccotti Park, and a way in which that particular park was paying close attention to artwork that had been done about collectivity, about activism, and about direct action. And so when you look at some of the ways in which the People's Library was built there, that it was built out of cardboard, and McKee talks about how it was a reference in some ways to Thomas Hirschhorn. And then you have the person that goes around doing the public projection of the illuminator, and he projects onto buildings, and that's like the work of Krzysztof Wodiczko, which comes out of the legacy of the Situationist International, and it really unleashes these art forms from the museum and has them actually being mobilized onto the street. And so this idea of somebody sitting in their room in this text that Groys is writing really connects with me, because it for me it shows this urgency of being able to kind of wield the work in the world, and not just in the safety of the antiseptic spaces of an art institution. And it liberates the avant-garde as a project that doesn't just exist in art history, but actually can happen in the world. And I think it's that same urgency that informs for me my desire to mobilize the plates that belong to the Iraqi Jewish community in projects like Dar al-Sulh, where they're not in vitrines, they're not politely sitting as objects in a vitrine, but they're actually coming out of the vitrine. The vitrine is broken, and they're able to be used as they should be.